So I am here today to review this book, which is Play by Stuart Brown. The reason I picked this up is that I have been wanting to rediscover my own sense of play. I'm naturally a very curious, a very wonder-filled, a very playful person, but very early in my life that got shut down. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home and community, and of course, authoritarian communities like that, they are very much against spontaneity and curiosity and play. Um, so that was one of the reasons. I think the other one probably is that I'm autistic and sometimes I had trouble with the social signals, social clues that are involved with play. Uh, so lately I've been talking to my therapist about it and just thinking about it in general for a few years and wanting to just rediscover that sense of playfulness. I was able from an early stage in life to incorporate solo play, but it's difficult for me sometimes. There are only certain people I can be playful around and only in certain circumstances. So I definitely want to expand that. I was hoping that this book would help me to do that, but it did not. This honestly was a truly awful book, and it really made me depressed to read it sometimes. I had to kind of keep slogging through, and it ended up being just a very slow read because it was just not something that I enjoyed reading or that was beneficial to me. But I decided to go ahead and slog through, read the whole thing, just so I could review it and kind of warn other people about it. And just to let you know, um, if you are looking to open that sense of play, if you're looking to revitalize that sense of play, this probably is not the book for you. Now, before I go into details, on the front cover, you see it says Stuart Brown in larger letters, and then it says with Christopher Vaughan. I'm not exactly sure what their relationship was. Maybe Stuart Brown was just too lazy to write it. Maybe he didn't have the requisite writing skills. I don't really know. The voice that comes through in this book, and honestly, very arrogantly so, is Stuart Brown's voice. It appears to be based on his ideas. It's definitely full of biographical material about him. So I'm just going to treat this as Stuart Brown's book since I don't really know about the relationship. I will probably not mention Christopher Vaughan again, but I just wanted you all to know that there was someone else helping him write this. Now you might be asking, what is the purpose of this book? You would think that it would be to present research about play, and I mean, I guess it does that once in a while. You might think that it is to reinvigorate your sense of play and help you understand how to play. And again, it does that once in a while, or at least attempts to do so, but that's really not the main purpose. If you had to do a pie chart of the topics that this book covers, the largest slice by far would be basically Stuart Brown sucking himself off. Um, it's so much biographical material, way too much. Like, yeah, biographical material is a good strategy in a nonfiction book. It lets you touch base with the author to understand their background. It keeps it from becoming too dry. The narrative part of it is engaging to readers. But this just goes on and on and on to the point that it's really like his biography or his extended resume. So much of it is just trying to make himself sound good. I mean, some of it is humble bragging and some of it is not so humble bragging. And so much of it is name dropping. Like, I know this important business person. I know this person on the race car circuit. I know this real estate mogul. I know these important academics that, have all this influence in their field. Um, it is just way too much. And it crowds out the time that he could spend actually talking about play. I don't think that this could be a full-length book without all of the arrogant biography. Um, and I wish he had taken it out. I wish it weren't a full-length book. It probably doesn't need to be if he doesn't have more to say about the actual topic that it's supposed to be about. And unfortunately, one of the main ways that his privilege and his arrogance manifests itself in this book is through prejudice. Now, I will say it's not an overt prejudice. He doesn't say like I hate poor people or queer people should be killed or black people are awful or anything like that. But it is definitely there. I wonder at certain points like how aware he is of his own prejudice because he does not seem to be a very self-aware person. But nonetheless, it is there, and I really wish that it weren't. And it is apparent through any close reading in like every chapter of this book. I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to start with some examples that are kind of less important. And by the way, not at all less important in terms of the people that they discriminate against, but just less important in terms of not as much time or space is spent on them in the book. And then I'm going to give you three areas where the prejudice is really, these are three of the themes of the book is prejudice in these different areas. So I'll start with some of the shorter examples and move into some of the more foundational ones. So one of the more low-key examples, even though this is still very important, would be just lack of representation. I'll give you the example of the relationships in this book. Every relationship that I can recall from this book is cishet normative. It's monogamous. It's the kind of relationship that he seems to have, as if he just can't acknowledge that other people have different ways of doing relationships. Another example, there's what I call extrovert privilege, right? These people that wherever they go, they just start a conversation with people. Doesn't matter if they're comfortable or not. They tend to talk loudly. They tend to assert their views on others. He's talking at one point about like doing this at a line at, I think it's at the store or something. And it's like, you know, and then I started talking to all these people at the line and I cheered everyone up that day and I made everyone happy and I was the hero of the line and everyone clapped, that kind of, that last part's kind of a meme, but it's like, that's the vibe you get from it, like this idea that like if I want to say something however I want to say it, it doesn't matter if I'm bothering other people, it doesn't matter if there are autistic people in the line or introverts or highly sensitive people that are going, oh, one of these people again. Like it's just like the way I have of doing things is the correct way and it's the way that I'm going to do it and I'm the hero. Another example in terms of racial prejudice, and this one just kind of made my jaw drop, is he talks several times in the book about this group of friends that he used to play with and how their way of playing was better than others and that kind of thing. And at one point, he's talking about going back to his old stomping grounds and seeing all these places he used to hang out. And he's just whining about, oh, times have changed and people don't do it the way we did anymore. And, the architecture has changed and there aren't as many empty lots and no one's playing pickup games or outdoor games and people are texting on their phones and blah, blah, blah. And he's listing all these things that he hates about the changes in the neighborhood. And in the middle of all that, he lists that he's seeing ethnic groups of people. And it's like, this list is like bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing, diversity, bad thing, bad thing, bad thing. I mean, he's basically saying by the context of this list that he doesn't like diversity. And like, I do not know, honestly, if he gets what he's doing, if he's doing it on purpose or if he's just completely like oblivious. It's disturbing. Um, a few pages later, he uses the R word for someone who experiences an intellectual disability or for people who do. And it's like this book came out in 2009. First paperback edition, I think it said, is 2010. So like he should have known better. I did use that word growing up because I didn't know any better, and then as soon as I understood, it was in like an ed psych or a developmental psych class or something in college. When I understood how disrespectful that word was, I stopped using it. He's an MD. He's working in the field of psychology. He ought to damn well know better, but he uses that word. Just doesn't bother him at all. And this brings me to one of the problems that occurs in every single chapter of this book, which is that Stuart Brown is in a narrow little box of normalcy. He does not want to look outside of his view to acknowledge even that people have different values and experiences, except the brief times when he does, he wants to criticize them. And he's done it in the previous examples, and he does it in what I think of as the three pillars of prejudice in this book. One of them is anthropocentrism, which it may not take as much, spatial and temporal time in the book, but it is a recurring theme, and so I really feel like I should mention it. Classism. Stuart Brown has such a hard on for capitalism, and even when it distorts his work, he doesn't care. And his prejudice about play itself. So let's talk about those. Now, in terms of anthropocentrism, play to him can involve torturing and murdering other creatures. As long as they're not human, it's fine. Well, he might be okay with it when it's human. He kind of hints in that direction, but he never goes there overtly. But when it comes to animals, murder them, torture them, abuse them, and if that amuses you, that is totally fine. In particular, he really hates birds. So There are a couple of examples involving ducks. In one example, it is fine for a teacher to like kidnap ducks and throw them into the classroom at a certain time to entertain the students. One of his fondest memories is, I think it's with his dad, but it's when he's a kid hunting ducks. So killing ducks is it's okay to take away the ducks' ability to play for the rest of their lives by taking away their lives themselves. That is totally fine. But that's fun. That's amusing to kill them. They don't deserve a sense of play, but we humans do. So anthropocentrism in that sense. Um, One of them involves like, and I'll get a little bit more to some of these topics later, but there's this kid that he seems to really dislike because he reads existential novels and plays video games. We'll get to this later, but Stuart Brown hates video games as much as he hates birds. Um, this kid apparently, in Stuart Brown's view, the way he tells the story, needs to just get off his lazy ass and go join, I think it's Outward Bound. And then it's a miracle. He treks through the woods all day, and then at the end of the day, they have to kill chickens for their dinner, and that changes his life, that kind of thing. Doesn't matter how the chickens feel, doesn't matter if they want to play, because this is all about humans, because humans are very much more important than animals, and honestly, by extension and by discussion in this book, much more important than the environment. Yeah, not a big fan of that theme. This leads us to the next pillar, which is probably the thickest, the most prominent pillar, which is Stuart Brown's classism. Um, this guy, the main way that he uses his research is to help big corporations, including Fortune 500 companies. So he's helping them destroy the world, destroy our environment, harm people, ruin our culture with play, with research about play. He's trying to teach them to be like more innovative so they can make more money. And he makes it very clear throughout the book that one of the main purposes of play is to make more money, right? Social, economic, and personal purposes that play has. And he may say that these are equally important, but you can tell from the book that his emphasis is on economics, that as play as a means of making money, and increasing social capital as well, because obviously he's very braggy. Um, it is a very, very disturbing thing. Like all the name dropping of famous people, important people, all the talking about how important this is. There's one point too where you really see the classism itself. It's where he's talking about the people who have intellectual disabilities in the very callous way, the very crude way that he does. And he's talking about, and you really see his privilege here about how he had this job delivering groceries to a neighborhood that was poor, with people who were poor, right? It's like these rich people that like clutch their monocle in their limousine and are like, oh no, a homeless person is over across the street, get away from them. And he talks about, oh, I was in so much danger and I didn't really realize. And it's like, dude, probably since you're very much privileged, you weren't in that much danger. You just you saw like a dirty doorknob and you clutched your monocle at it. But even if it was a dangerous neighborhood, guess who it was even more dangerous for? The people who lived there, the people that you had to deliver groceries to. Like, it's just so telling of his entire story, right? That's something that bothered him. That one of the only times he's ever been, I won't even say in danger, uncomfortable in his life was around poor people. And one of the other things that was more on a personal level in terms of his research, right? He early on he has sort of a little aside where between bragging about things that he's done, he talks about definitions of play. He does not realize that capitalism is antithetical to these aspects of play. So, for instance, he says play is apparently purposeless and done for its own sake. Everything under capitalism is done for the sake of generating money for those who hoard wealth and other resources. There's Perfect capitalism has no purposelessness. It has no play. It has no free time. That's what capitalism is. It says it's voluntary. No, capitalism makes us do horrible things to each other that we don't want to do. It gaslights. Gaslights us and is not voluntary, right? Um, Freedom from time, right? That's no, capitalism takes our time away. Improvisational potential. No, capitalism wants to shut everything down that has to do with spontaneity or curiosity, or it wants to make everything part of the machine for the wealth hoarders. Now, maybe those wealth hoarders have some free time, but they don't want any of us to have free time. And I and most of the people that read this book are not rich enough to become one of those wealth hoarders. We're not like Stuart Brown, so these things are anathema to capitalism. And Brown seems oblivious of this. Or maybe he is aware and he's purposely gaslighting us. Either way, it's pretty disturbing. And I also want to mention here several times in the book, he mentions like people that are his heroes, people that he really admires. And they are like the most awful people. Most of them are business leaders. So, like Warren Buffett, I think he mentions Bill Gates, maybe. He mentions Oprah. He seems to be a big admirer of Oprah. And it's like Oprah's whole shtick is like commodifying positivity. She takes people's feelings of positivity and goodwill and she turns them into money for her empire. Like, what a horrible, execrable person. I think the only non-business leader he mentions as someone he looks up to is Ernest Hemingway, who did have some talent as a writer, but who was so anti-nature, anti-environment, pro-hunting, which no surprise that Stuart Brown would like that. Um, just an absolutely awful person. And then the third pillar of prejudice I would like to discuss. Now, it probably isn't the thickest pillar. That's definitely capitalism. That's the one that occurs the most. But I saved it for last because it is about the very subject that this book is ostensibly about, which is play. Stuart Brown's prejudice about play, and in particular, play styles. So he does, to his credit, give a pretty comprehensive list of play styles. I think he's left a couple of things out, but I think overall it's a good list. He then proceeds to demonstrate that he definitely thinks certain play styles are superior to others, specifically rough and tumble play and team sports. Now, he even acknowledges that team sports can kind of be a form of, or can be something that catalyzes xenophobia. He doesn't use the word xenophobia, I don't think, but he talks about how the insiders in team sports, it's so great the camaraderie they have, even if they tease each other, they're together, they have that solidarity, and it's okay that they mock people outside of their group. Like to him, that's an acknowledged part of play is mocking others and harming others, as we've seen with some of the other examples. Um, the abstract arts, for instance, he seems to not care about at all or hold in contempt. Now, if they're more practical arts, like jewelry making, he mentions at one point, and if there's a financial payout to them, then he seems to be okay with them, at least the financial part of it. But he does not seem to like abstract arts at all as forms of play, or just at all. And the example I gave, right? The kid that, how dare he read existential novels and play video games? He needs to go out and murder some chickens. That's a good summation of how Stuart Brown sees play. Um, and just the video game aspect of it. Stuart Brown hates video games, I can tell you. Near the end of the book, there's a chapter on the dark side of play. And probably over half of that chapter, at least a very significant part of that chapter, is about like how bad video games are. And he seems to basically be saying everyone that even tries playing them is, lending themselves over, putting themselves at risk for video game addiction. And he tries to talk about like all the people every year that die of blood clots because they won't get up from playing video games and things. Now, mind you, he never says one word about people that die from injuries in team sports. That's okay. That's perfectly fine because he likes that form of play. But the video game addiction, people like he goes on and on and on. And it's very like satanic panic type stuff. He doesn't bring religion into it, but it very much has that feel. And while I'm talking about that dark side of play chapter, one of the other things that he spends the most time on is bullying. Like, this guy does not get what a bully he is. He does not get how prejudicial he is. He's basically a bully saying bullying is wrong. And it's very gaslighty, and I really, really dislike it as well. So, what is actually useful in this book? And to me, I gave it 1 star on Storygraph and Goodreads. It wasn't enough to bring it up even to 2 stars. But there's a little bit of a section at the front that talks about his definitions of play that might open some interesting conversation. There's that section on play styles that might as well. And then right near the end, really and as an afterthought, there's a little section where he actually does discuss ways to reinvigorate your sense of play. They're kind of meh. I don't know how useful they are. Um, but, they're there. If they were just that section, just a little article about ways to reinvigorate play without all the other 200 pages of crap, I might give them 2 or 3 stars. Three if I was, feeling generous. The thing I don't like about them is the very first one is talking about taking a play history. And what does he do? he sends you off to his website to actually do the full thing. He doesn't get rid of all the other useless pages and put the full thing in the book. No, he sends you to his website because he just wants branding and website traffic. He just wants ways to generate money, even though you've already spent money on his useless book. Um, if you're going to read this book, skip to those sections. They're really the only useful ones. So, and I'm sure Stuart Brown would say this is not, but the point I got from this book, and I think anyone that closely reads this book, the point you get from this book is, according to Stuart Brown, play is about making money and making other people normal like you are. It's a very dictatorial, it's a very authoritarian sense of play. And that brings me all the way around to, what I was talking about in the beginning of this video. What closed down my sense of play when I was young was that sense of authoritarianism, that sense that I couldn't be creative, I couldn't be myself, I couldn't explore. What if I explored, video games, right? That was a prejudice in my childhood was I found a lot of consolation in video games. People didn't like them. They had heard bad things and satanic panic sorts of things about them. Um, I was considered weird. I was considered different. And so I wasn't allowed to play with others. I wasn't allowed to be spontaneous and creative in the ways that I wanted to be. And I come to this book and, I remember there was a person, I'm not going to mention names, but there was a person early in my childhood who used humor a lot. He joked and laughed and smiled a lot. And he was a scary and dangerous person who hurt me psychologically and sometimes physically. Um, Stuart Brown reminds me a lot of that person. He's smarter than that person, perhaps, but as far as his values, they seem to be exactly the same. As far as the way that he uses play, they seem to be very, very similar. That prejudice that's involved in what he considers play. I I think that's really why I found this book disturbing and depressing, why I cannot recommend it to anyone else. This book is shit. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I know that not many people read this book, and a lot of my videos are pretty niche anyway. So if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. If you have anything to say, like even if you disagree with me, as long as you do it respectfully, like feel free to leave a comment or message me or whatever you would like to do. Um, but I really appreciate so much those who watch these videos. To all of you, much love, and I hope you're having a fantastic day.